head was just thinking. I'm gonna move over there just because they're gonna be all over here.
Hello, sir.
Good to see you.
How are you?
It's good to see you.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
All right, we'll call committee of the whole to order. Sorry, just having a little technical issue up here. So first, I'll move to approve the minutes of the January 20th committee of the whole without the necessity of a reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes. Okay, so our two main items tonight are hearing from our bond counsel for our annual presentation about the debt load, and then we also have continued conversation, the presentation from the administration about the City Hall proposal. So I'm assuming we're starting with bond counsel. That's kind of where we were thinking, but I'll turn it over to Director Mahoney and team.
Great. All right. Good evening, everyone. Just by way of introduction, my name is Jeff Rink. I'm a managing director with KeyBank Capital Markets. And I head our public finance efforts here, working with municipalities and school districts and other governmental entities. And I'm joined today by bond counsel from Bricker, Catherine Swartz. So for those that have heard from us in the past, wonderful to see all of you. And for the newer council members, welcome, congratulations. And please, hopefully you'll see as we sort of get into our presentation, we really want to be here as a resource for the administration and for you. So we think we've put together a presentation that we've dropped off at your spot up there, but as we go through it, invariably there's always questions, as we welcome and should be. So please interrupt us, and we'll drill down into whatever questions you may have as we go along, if that's acceptable. So we're obviously here to talk about the city's plan of finance for 2026. It consists, I know, of a number of legislative items around what's called a note issue, and then there is actually some bond legislation. And so we'll explain sort of why we have both and what they're looking to accomplish. Also, a big, important topic that I can assure you we are, with your wonderful finance staff, are constantly looking at and working on is sort of the capital and more so debt planning of the city. So we'll talk a lot about that because I know we do come here every year, and so you only see us once a year, and in some instances we're saying some of the same things we've said in previous years, but there is a lot of analysis that goes into this, right? It's not an unending supply of revenue that the city can just continue to borrow from, right? And so I do say to you, we do try to look at all that, and with the city administration and with the finance department, make sure that we're sort of properly planned so that what the administration and council decide from a policy perspective and projects you may want to fund, that at the end of the day, we can afford to do that, right? One of the wonderful things about the city of Lakewood, among many, is your credit rating, right? Your credit rating is a AA2, and we'll talk about that in terms of that is on the upper echelon of municipalities across the country, and one in particular for Lakewood because of a lot of the wonderful things that the community offers, and then also because of how the city is managed and run, and that is on the administrative side as well as council, and how you also oversee sort of the budget and finance throughout the year. So we'll get into all of that, try to be mindful of time, but again, encourage questions certainly as we go along. We truly want to be a resource for the city. So my role at KeyBank is to sell the debt that the city ultimately makes a decision on issuing. And so we would sell that debt to institutional funds and other investors in the market, right, that would purchase the city's debt. Catherine, who will absolutely be a part of this presentation, I don't mean to monopolize it, but as bond counsel, she drafts all of the legislative documents and all the documents that we need in order to sell the debt into the market and raise the funds for your projects. So what we wanted to start out with, and I know you have the books up there, so I apologize. I know some of the font is small. But we always want to present and make sure you're aware, or at least have a resource to go to see the amount of debt the city has and what is exactly that debt. So starting on page, what I believe 5 of the book, there's the beginning of the city's debt profile. And the page that's on the screen right now reflects sort of the longest dated debt that the city has. So the city has borrowed over the years and currently has their oldest debt as a bond issue back from 2016. And so we'll come back and talk about that bond issue because it's eligible this year to be refinanced. And so you can sort of think about that as the ability, like if you have the ability to take advantage of lower mortgage rates on your house, we likely will have an opportunity later this year to take advantage of lower interest rates and refinance this issue so that the net cost, or really in this case, the net savings accrues to the city's benefit. So we'll talk about that because that is why you have bond legislation as part of this overall financial plan for this year. And it reflects sort of your oldest bond issue, which goes back to 2016. If we skip ahead to page 7, sorry, just the page before this, I just want to point out one other thing. On page 7, in the farmost column, we total up all of the city's annual debt service per year. So this is all of the city's debt and what debt service is due every single year until, if there was no more borrowings, then this would be it, right? And it would take you out to 2049. And as you can see, it's descending, which is normal, right? Because your older debt will eventually come off the books. And so I just want to point out a couple quick things because, you know, we're here always talking about every year the city's financial plan, right? And the city's financial plan is usually, rightfully so, projects that have to get funded, and therefore we have to borrow against those projects. So the key thing is, how do we pay for those, right? And how do we pay for those so that it doesn't affect the general operations of the city, right? And so part of the way we can continue to do this is the city's overall debt service is coming down every year. So for example, from last year to this year, we just picked up about $500,000 of, I'll say savings, but it's because another bond issue was paid off. So the debt service for the city last year was $500,000 larger than it is this year. And then next year, it's going to be another $300,000 lower. It'll be about the same in 2028, right? And these are just the numbers you can see on the far right column. And then in 2029, there's another reduction of about $800,000. And then the big reduction occurs in 2032 when it's nearly $1.5 million less in debt service. So I just wanted to point that out. We don't always maybe take a lot of time in focusing on that, but to point out that part of the reason that the city can afford to borrow and do the projects the city wants to do is in part because of how the slope of what you're paying off, right, is in place. And it's automatically, right, descending and going down, which means as long as our revenue is staying the same, and later in the presentation we'll show you the revenue you have for your debt service is actually going up, right? Because you, unlike many cities, the city of Lakewood gets property tax millage dedicated to your debt, right? So I know many of you are well aware of that, right? So I don't mean to profess that that's, you know, incredible, but it is, for a nerd like me, it is unique because most cities don't have that. Most cities have to fund their projects, their debt, right out of their general fund, and they're making decisions, should we pave this road this year, or should we buy a new police car, for example, right? The city of Lakewood doesn't, for the most part, have to face that because you have dedicated property tax millage that goes to pay your debt service, along with the water and sewer fund, right, that funds your water and sewer, wastewater type improvement projects, right? So we look at both the expenditures of debt, right, and that overall debt service, and then we also look at, obviously, the revenues that are available to pay. So I'll pause there if there's any sort of high-level questions related to that, and then we'll jump into the specifics of sort of what the plan is for this year for you all to of course, react to.
Madam Chair. First of all, thank you, Director Mahoney, Mayor George, for putting together a great presentation tonight. Jeff and Catherine, good to see you again.
Me too.
The clarification of terms, debt service is principal and interest?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
And then the reason for those jumps down this year, next year, into 2032 is paying off one of the series in the preceding pages?
That's exactly
Just
right.
unpack
Right.
that for us
That's
a little
right.
bit.
For the most part, it's debt coming off of the books and being paid off, or some decrease in an existing bond issue that we purposely may have, structured for debt service to go down as time goes on. But yes, you're understanding it correctly.
Okay, and so another question for the last several years, and I think including this year, we have some very expensive
Yes.
wastewater treatment plant and wastewater treatment system projects that we're financing. Sometimes those are funded by various grants that we get.
Mm-hmm.
If they're funded by grants, they won't appear anywhere in these pages. Is that true?
100% true.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's
What
all, Madam
happens
Chair.
is when you have the grants, we keep them in bands, bond anticipation notes, the short term, until you get the reimbursement. And then at the time that you get the reimbursement, we use that to pay off the bands. We never bond those out.
Okay, so that's an important detail. So when you're getting a $50 million grant, you don't get it necessarily on January 1. You have to be able to pay for your construction outlays and then get reimbursement. So we incur some cost in the financing of notes, probably, but it's acceptable if you're getting $50 million in principal, certainly. Okay,
Through the
thank
grant.
you.
Yep. Well said. That's correct. Okay, so for this year, if we jump to page 9, so I know it's a big dollar amount, right? The dollar amount that if you were to add up, you have various pieces of legislation that collectively will add up to this number. Catherine can certainly explain if you'd like to detail why that is, but that's from a legal perspective. There's different projects and categories, and so they have to be drafted in different types of legislation. Collectively, they all add up to $59,740,000, which we're estimating the size of the note. Now, of that $59 million, $32 million of that are for projects you've already done, and you've already borrowed for that. So you're not borrowing $59 million of new money, right? You've already borrowed $32 million of that last year for projects that were done primarily in 2024 and 2025. And remember, those projects, they encompass sort of general capital improvements throughout the city, including city facilities, as well as water and wastewater. So there's different funding sources, which we'll talk about. The idea is that we keep these projects, as Catherine was implying or stating, we fund your projects, your capital projects, right? At the end of the day, it's the administration's decision and council's decision what you're going to fund and how much. And then we set it up so that you fund it on a short-term basis while the projects are being constructed. And then when your capital projects are completed and done, and you know what that final cost is, and you know if there's going to be any grant funding, right, that's going to take out any of that, we then wait for an opportunity to refinance one of your older bond issues. And when we get that opportunity, we then suggest we should put the project dollar amounts, the dollars associated with projects that are already completed, we like to put that in a bond, so that we can fix that out over the long term, and you're not continuing to have to borrow every single year for that, right, and pay it off every year. We like to get it off the books so you're not having to pay again to borrow on that every year. And so we'll talk more about how that plays into our request this year, but the $59 million is the total between new money, and we'll talk about that on the next page, and existing borrowing, right, existing note that you have coming due that we have to pay off. And so on the next page, this will start to become more clear. On page 10, there's you could see in the second line item up top, $32,695,000. That's the note from last year, and has your sort of 2024. There might, I don't know, Catherine, if there'd be any 2023 projects in that.
No, we last did a bond issue in 2024,
Yeah.
and as part of that bond issue, we wrapped in every project that was from bans from 2023 and prior. So the oldest that we have right now outstanding in bans, bond anticipation notes, is 2024.
So that $32,695,000 consists solely of projects that the city has completed in 2024 and completed last year. And then the city's proposal, the administration's proposal, our proposal to you tonight is to add $27 million of new money projects to that, right? And those projects are all listed below. And I know that's a decision, right, that you all will make as far as what you think the projects should be. What I could tell you is we've done the analysis, and the city does have the capacity. Again, I don't want to make it sound like the city has unending capacity forever, but the city does have the capacity to borrow this amount in such a way that we can pay it off over time from the millage that we get dedicated to debt service, as well as the water and the wastewater fund, right, that come from fees, and I think also some charter millage for some of that wastewater work. So there is the capacity to borrow, and I'll talk more about why that is, right, and how that is. Part of it is what we've already talked about. Your debt service is coming down every year, so we have automatically some capacity because of that, right? Part of it is your revenues going up, so we have a little bit more capacity because of that. But we'll talk about sort of where this capacity is coming from, because I know that's of huge interest, as it should be to you all.
Madam Chair, quick clarifying question for this or the previous slide. So the Retire Series 2025, just want to make sure I heard you or heard you completely. That amount is going from one-year notes, short-term, to longer-term bonds, first of all, right?
Well, you're getting ahead of us, but that's true.
Okay.
Normally, it wouldn't. Normally, well, I take that back. Technically, what's happening is the bond I mentioned that we're going to talk about in a minute is not eligible to be refinanced until later this year, like September. So, so you are correct, Councilman. But what we have to do is we have to sell a short-term note right now, because we're not able to do the refunding bond today.
Okay.
And so this would be in the note, all in one note right now.
All right. My real question is, I don't think we completed all 2025 projects by December 31 last year. There may be some projects that are still, we're finishing them or we're waiting for the parts, et cetera.
Yeah.
So the total of $32,695,000 covers, I think you said 24 and 25.
Correct.
But if there's additional project revenues to complete 2025 projects, those aren't there. Where are they? They're somewhere else on our balance sheet? Or am I misinformed?
There's no requirement that while the city typically does complete the project and expends all the project proceeds before going to bonds, there's no requirement that you do that. That's just kind of been the procedure that the city has done historically. So we're getting ahead a little bit to the bonds because we have this $32,695,000 twice. We do have it in the note ordinance, and then we also have it in the bond ordinance, because what we're proposing in the bond ordinance is if we go ahead with this refunding deal, we're going to roll in those projects, and it's up to the $32,695,000. So if there's a project or two that we don't want, that we get to October or September when we're issuing this, and we don't want to do the total amount, you're directing to Renee to make the decision, but you're just saying we can only roll this amount into the bond.
Okay, so the highest possible number is 32,695.
That's
There's
right.
not another million for an
That's right.
incomplete project. Okay, that's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to get.
that's the good news is there's enough handle on the existing projects to know it's not going to be more than that. That's what we borrowed. But if it ends up coming in less, we don't want to have fixed it out long term when you don't really need it fixed out, because we could pay it off.
Okay, so essentially 24, 25, and 26, we're talking about whatever the amounts are, doing notes for now and maybe bonds when it is timely.
That's right, except the 2026 projects we're not anticipating, nor are we asking for permission through the legislative process to bond any of the 2026 projects. All 2026 projects would be left in the note, right? And when we talk about a note versus a bond, a note is simply a one-year note. So we would sell this note in the amount of $59 million for 1 year. It would come due this time next year, well, really April of next year. But we would allow the ability to prepay some of it, and that some of it would be that $32,695,000 if we get to September and the bond market continues to look as it looks today and it makes sense to refinance your bond. So if we get to December and something happens and rates have spiked and it doesn't make sense, right? There's no savings to the city. We're not forced. Like you're not being asked to pass anything that forces the city to sell bonds in September no matter what. But we really would like the permission to be able to do it because the market, like everything, is sort of sensitive, right? So if we can talk through all this and it makes sense to you all, and the finance director has the permission to then go and do it when it makes sense, and the earliest we could do it would be in September, it's in our benefit, the city's benefit, to be able to react quickly to the market so we can get you the most savings. But we're not obligated to do that. So if rates spike and the bond refunding that we'll talk about next doesn't make sense, then we'll just simply be back here next year talking about the same note issue, but at $59 million, right?
Understood, thanks.
So the new money portion of that, right, is that $27 million. The projects are listed below in terms of just what's in this. And so that's the note side. If you flip to the next page on page 11, I know there's a lot on this page, but here's the good news. The bottom line is the bottom left-hand corner of page 11. Where you go back to that 2016 bond that we've already now talked about, that's eligible to be refinanced come September. And so if the market stays the same as it is now, we're hopeful it actually improves a little bit over time this year. But if it were to be today, if we were at September 1 today, we would be able to refinance that bond, right? Sell another bond to pay off that bond at lower interest rates. And that would result for the next 10 years. There's 10 more years left till 2036 on that bond. And that would allow or would result in the city having about $55,000 to $60,000 a year in savings on your debt service, right? So, you know, our collective thought is if we can do that and get some savings for the city, we should always look to do that before the market changes and we don't have that opportunity. So the thought would be that we would, if we are able to get your permission through the legislative process to issue this bond, this wouldn't be until September, and the market would have to be, you know, correct, cooperative to generate these savings. And, you know, maybe the savings goes up to 65,000, maybe it goes down to 50. It shouldn't move outside of that range unless there's a world event, and I guess in the world we live in now, you never know, right? But unless there is a major world event, the market should be in that relative range to give the city some savings. And so we do expect to be able to hit the market at the best time come September, and that's why you sort of see, unlike previous years, that's why you see a bond ordinance before you as well as this note ordinance. So any questions on the bond side of things? That's not something we're doing now. It's the September, and it would only be done if indeed it results in savings to the city.
The 2016 bonds that we're essentially refinancing,
Yep.
are those general obligation bonds? I know we kind of talked about how there were some bonds that were tied to revenue sources, so those are...
They are. Great
they
question.
Would continue to be that.
You're spot on. So they are general obligation bonds, but that doesn't mean that every project in there doesn't have a dedicated revenue source outside of property taxes. Like there are some projects, most likely in that dollar amount that we would refund, that are being paid out of the water sewer fund, most likely, because they were projects that were water sewer eligible. So you're right, it is a general obligation bond, but it's likely not all being paid with property taxes. We are likely gathering some dollars from the water sewer funds to be able to pay some of those projects that are water sewer projects.
So we can pay them however we want,
That's
but
right.
the securitization of them is general obligations,
that's
any
great.
city money. Yeah.
That's correct.
What's interesting is prior to 2016, 2016 included a lot of refunding, and then it did include a lot of the city's revenue debt. There was some water debt, there was some
Right.
sewer debt, that was part of that, and that had been previously issued as revenue debt because at the time the city did not have the debt capacity to issue it all as general obligation. But starting in 2016, there was the capacity. We moved that debt into all general obligation.
And that's solely because that's how you get your best, as you know, Councilman, your best interest rate, right? Like the best debt you can issue, the lowest interest rate the city can get is by issuing it as a general obligation, but you hit the nail on the head. That doesn't mean you can't pay for it from different revenue sources. And that's
The risk is lower. That's why the rate's
Yeah,
lower.
that's right.
They can collect more.
That's right.
Right, yeah.
That's right. That's right. Yep. So it is a general obligation bond. The bond that we would propose to issue to refinance that would also be a general obligation bond. We'll talk about the debt limits that Ohio law prescribes in a moment, and Catherine will walk you through that. But there is the capacity to do that as a general obligation, again, just to take advantage of the lowest interest rates for you.
Madam Chair, just a couple more increase our debt financing combat jargon here. So the 2016A bonds are callable December 1, but we're talking about September refinancing. That's just because you need those 2 months to do all the paperwork, essentially.
So actually, you can do a currently callable issue. You can do a bond issue that will prepare for that call date on December 1 up to 90 days in advance.
Okay.
So legally, you can do it starting, it's like September 3rd or something. But
Okay.
you could close a bond issue on September 3rd.
So that's just industry norms. So it's really 90 days before you're due.
It could be any time after that, too.
And any time after. And then you're pouncing because what passes for low prime is 6.5%, and you're calculating the chart in the bottom left of the slide as assuming we hold at 6.5% prime, and therefore we're at 3% roughly in the bond market. Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah, that's a fair thought. Although I would just say the tax-exempt bond market, right? Not to get too in the weeds, but because you're a city, you can borrow on a tax-exempt basis, right? Which means that investors that buy your debt, the interest rate they get, the interest income they get on your debt is exempt from federal income tax. They don't have to pay income tax on that. As a result, they'll take a lower interest rate than like a stock of KeyBank, for example, which is taxable. Anything they earn on that's taxable. So the municipal bond market, tax-exempt bond market, is not really, it doesn't follow prime exactly. You're not wrong. Like generally, if prime is coming down or going up, eventually we'll see something. But remember, the prime rate is an incredibly short-term rate, right? It's an overnight rate, essentially. And so in the tax-exempt bond market, there's an entire market different from that, and it's years 1 all the way out to years 30, right? Just depending on the length of the debt. So you're not wrong. It generally follows it, but I wouldn't want you to think that
It's not directly keyed.
Yeah, it's
one to the
absolutely
other. Okay.
not directly
So
tied to
I'll
that.
read up offline on the mysteries and wonders of the tax-exempt bond market, but presumably we can look up those rates. Right now, you're saying they're favorable. You're hopeful they'll continue to be for another 8-9 months.
I would actually say a better proxy, but it's not exact at all. Not at all exact proxy, but the better proxy would be like the 10-year Treasury. And you certainly could look that up, right, every day and see sort of what's happening with that.
And you memorize those every morning before breakfast, right?
Right.
The one thing to note is if you look in the 2016 bonds, you can see that each maturity has a different coupon. So you're comparing that, and that's just how they were sold. So why this says all candidates versus savings that generate the most positive savings is it may not make sense to refund each one of those maturities because the 4%, the 5% and the 4%, you're gonna get more savings by refunding them today, rather than the 32s and the 33s.
So the word candidates means our own debt
Yeah, you're
in the
looking and you
city.
can see that
Right.
coupon rate going
got
down.
it.
You can just see it's a different number. Now, each of those were set in 2016, and it had to do with a lot of factors, including if they were sold as a premium or not. And there were a lot of factors. You know, when those were sold back in 2016, we were trying to get the best interest rate, you know, the best rate overall that we could. KeyBank was trying to get the best overall. We weren't looking at refunding. But now you look at it, you have the higher interest rates you're gonna have more savings if you refund them now.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. No, great question. Okay, so if we go to page 12, just very quickly, of the new money, so we've done this in previous years when you've had the new money portions of your note, right, and the projects, right? We've listed out, these are the new money projects being proposed, adding up to 27 million. And then on the right-hand column under fund, right, I know it's a number, but we can explain to you, we're showing you the funds where it gets paid from, right? And that's what's really critical here, is that we always need to make sure we have capacity in these funds to pay for ultimately the longer-term debt service of the city's borrowing, so that you're not having to make policy decisions from your normal operating general fund dollars, right? And so you could see, of course, the sewer and the water improvements are funded out of funds that start with a 5, the 500 funds, right? 510, 511 are for sewer, 501 is water, and then the 400 fund is your bond retirement fund, and we'll show you how that fund is doing in a moment, because it's doing very well. And your 400 fund is where your general capital, your non-water sewer, non-utility type debt gets funded from. So all your sidewalks, street improvements, city facility improvements of that will get funded out of Fund 401. Okay, I think just maybe quickly we just hit on the debt limits, if that's all right, Catherine, do you mind?
Every year we talk about two different debt limits. One is your direct debt limit, which is outlined on page 14 as a clearer outline. And this one is not a challenging one for a number of reasons. It's just you just look right at the par amount, and you do have some outstanding debt that is not tax exempt. However, most of your debt for the last 8 or 9 years, we can include an income tax pledge, and that income tax pledge just indicates that you will use income tax if you have to, but it's just an additional pledge, and basically any debt that you issue is no longer subject to the direct debt limitation. So this we don't have to focus too much on, because we're not actually adding any debt in either of these issues that would be considered. And this is just a state law requirement, but it's not being added. You have plenty of capacity, I think is the bottom line here. The more complicated debt limit that we talk about, and we talk about this one every year, and this one is not necessarily fun to talk about, is the 10 mil limitation. And the 10 mil limitation is much more complicated to calculate. You look at each piece of property and all of your overlappers, and you have to make sure that there's no more than 1% of taxation on any one property. It's not very clear. However, we try and make it as clear for you as we can. And so we have shown what we would estimate your 10 mil calculation to be after you issue the bond anticipation notes in 2026, including all of your new money. And at that point in time, after we issue 59 million and change, whatever the total amount is, we look at, it looks like we are going to have 7.1163 of 10 mils used. And what that means is, in order to calculate how much available we could issue, we have to look at the par amount plus the maximum maturity of that debt. So we're just assuming, because a lot of your debt is about 27, 28, 29 years when you do a weighted average maturity. So we plugged in 29 years, and theoretically at 6%, you could issue in new money after 2026, assuming today's assessed valuation, 61 million. Now, what is great, the City of Lakewood's assessed valuation has been steadily increasing year over year. And so we would have to do this calculation in 2027 when you've paid off all the 2026 debt. That number, this is kind of the lowest number. This is assuming no AV change, and it's also assuming all of the we haven't taken out, we're not looking at it in 2027 yet. We haven't taken out your debt that you're paying off in December 1, 2026. I'll pause there because that's a lot of information, but it's just showing you what that debt limit will look like.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful, because I think I know what you're saying.
Okay.
But I think it would be helpful to go through like every line item on this chart on page 16 and just talk about it.
Okay.
That may be a lot, but I think it would be helpful.
Okay. So what we look at when we are calculating your overlapping debt is we have to put together what, this spreadsheet that Jeff has put together, where he has your total principal and interest, that's back on page 7. So he's put this together, and this on page 7, what this is showing you is principal and interest that is due on everything except for the bond anticipation note. Because your bond anticipation note is a little quirky, right? Really, you're gonna have the full amount is gonna be due next year. So in order to calculate out what the indirect debt limit is, what we need to do is we need to take the total issue of 2026, and we have estimated all of those projects having a weighted average maturity of 29 years. So then we calculate as if we've issued 29-year bonds and done and created a debt service where we have assumed a 6% interest rate. So that's where the 6% down below. So, and then we have to figure out on what year is the highest debt service. And the calculation that we come out with is that your highest debt service year is 2027. That will make some sense to you because you can see that 2027 is the highest debt service year currently, right? It's going to, in 2027, we're looking forward, not looking at 2026. Going forward, that's going to be your highest debt service year, right? So then you add in the bond anticipation notes and you look at what the highest debt service will be, and that shows, and so this 12 million, I would have to go back and look at it, but that's showing a pretty significant principal payment related to the bonds as well. And that is also including your overlappers too. There's a lot that goes into that. And then we look at the assessed valuation for your current year, which is 1.7 billion. And then that is used to filter into how many mills. There is a calculation that has to be done there. Are you with me so far?
So you're jumping around a little, but so the highest debt service, I understand, that's the debt payment that will be due in 2027. That's based on the charts from earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The next level, assessed valuation, that's the total assessed value of every property in Lakewood.
City, yes.
City, okay. And the mills required, so then that is an evaluation of those two. Is that like a 1.7 billion divided by 12 million?
I would have to. I could get back to you on that, but it's, I think, a little more complicated than that.
Okay.
But I'd have to just look at my spreadsheet and make sure that I understood that in order to give you the answer there.
But I will say the mill, you're on the right target. Like the millage is how many mills of property tax, right? Based on your valuation, do we have to collect to be able to pay that highest debt service payment? And so you're right. It's going to be a formula very close to what you're suggesting, and you're going to come up with that 7.1 mills. Now, I just want to say for the record, because if you go back and you look at those earlier charts, you're not going to see numbers that approach 12.7 for your highest debt service, right? That's a theoretical number, as if you were going to go to bonds right now and pay a large principal payment on that $59 million. And that's not what we're proposing to do. It's not what cities should do. You don't want to put all of your debt service right now up front. You want to spread it out over time when your debt service is coming down, right? Like we've shown you on the previous pages. So that 12.7 is just a theoretical number, but you're understanding what it is. It's the theoretical highest debt service number you would have. And then in order to service that theoretical number, according to state law, based on the city's assessed valuation, you need to have 7.1 mils of taxes generated. And you're only allowed to hit 10 in this debt limitation, right? So as Catherine's going to walk you through, you have to look at where the other, she says overlappers, the other taxing districts, the school district, the county, right? The taxing districts that, if you own a piece of property in Lakewood, who you're paying taxes to everywhere. So it's not City of Cleveland, but it'll be Lakewood Schools, it'll be Cuyahoga County, it'll be the Metro Parks, right? Things that you're having to pay. Those are the overlapping type taxing districts that Catherine's talking about. And they're going to have a lower amount of debt, especially the county. I shouldn't say lower amount of debt. The county, because their valuation is going to be astronomical because it's the entire county, not the city. So their millage requirement, right, is going to be way, way lower than what yours would be because they have such a higher, you know, valuation to pull from because it's all of the county, not just City of Lakewood. So you're understanding it correctly. And then, Catherine, if you want to just keep walking down, I think if you walk through every line item, it'll make
Sure.
sense.
Yep, and if so you take, you gave me a moment to actually do the calculation, make sure I wasn't taking you astray. But if you take highest debt service divided by assessed valuation and multiply by 1,000, then you get 7.1163.
And that's because 1 mil is equal to
To 1%, or what, 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah. So that's how we get there. So then assessed valuation, and I mentioned the 29 and the 6% because those are important to factor into the highest debt service. So that's way down below. But let's go down. So, highest assessed valuation is repeated, City of Lakewood millage, then these overlapping, we take the largest overlappers like the county and
schools.
It might be it's either the RTA or the schools, and see how much they use, and they use 0.6348, and so that shows that the mills available to the city is 2.2489, and then the years assumed here is, we repeat that a couple of times, and to be honest, dollars generated I don't think is an important number for you. And so then the total debt able to issue is, this becomes very complicated because you could issue a larger par amount of debt if you were issuing 39-year, if your maximum maturity was 39 years compared to 10 years. So it all looks at what you're issuing. You tend to be in the 27, 28, 29 range, just like looking at your 40-year projects like water and sewer, and you're managing against your sidewalks, which are 10 years. So that's kind of what happens there. So then what the millage amount available, 29 years, you look at the interest rate for additional bonds, you assess valuation, we're repeating again, and that's how we come to this calculation of additional debt available is 61 million.
And this is, if I may, this is kind of the constitutional limit, basically because the state of Ohio has to have some formula for determining your ability.
For general obligation.
So it's more of a legal requirement than a practical one.
It is.
Or however we want to operate.
And we won't go too deep into the woods, but for a number of years, until we got some significant increases in your assessed valuation, there were a couple of years where these numbers we were really close. Like, we were at 9.7 or something back in the late, 2018, 2019, those types of years. And during those years, the city made the decision to issue their bond anticipation note as an income tax revenue note. And the sole reason of doing that was to make sure that we didn't have any issues under this debt limit, because the city is unusual in that you have a dedicated revenue source. This debt limit is not set up for the city of Lakewood because the concern is to make sure that municipalities don't overborrow. That was what the point is here. But you had dedicated revenue sources. You had the ability to repay. You just couldn't issue general obligation notes. So what we did for a number of years is issue income tax-backed revenue notes so that would alleviate the issue for the debt limit, and the city was able to issue all of its bonds as general obligation, keep all of its bonds where there's a bigger advantage to be general obligation, we kept everything in general obligation then. So there's a lot of room right now. That wasn't always the case. And even when it wasn't the case, you still went ahead with your borrowing.
So here's the most important thing, though, right? So the bottom line number is 61 million, which technically, legally means under this debt limit, after you do, if you were to approve everything that's being asked of you for this borrowing, 59 million, under this, state debt limit, it would say the city still has capacity to issue another 61 million. We're not suggesting that, right? Like, the debt limits, I think you said it perfectly, Councilman, they're more sort of safeguards and guidelines, but they're not specific to, like, what we always need to look at is what the city can afford to pay and from what sources. And as long as we can identify those sources of where you're paying from it, or where you are going to pay the projects from, then we feel collectively okay. And the credit rating agency that we'll talk about next has agreed with that, right? Because they've kept you constant at what your credit rating is. So your understanding is spot on, but don't look at this number and think, oh, hey, the administration and KeyBank's coming back and saying we got another 61 million, right? Like, we will always look at how the city, can pay for the project.
And this is 61 million in 2026. I mean, we're also not expecting that this is what you're going to do, but there is in 2026 a principal amount of 4.8 million that's going to come off in December 1. So you would add that. If you're looking at what is your capacity for next year, assuming no change in an AV, it's the 61 plus the 4.8 million.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick follows. Catherine, par is what?
Par amount
principal?
is the principal amount of the issue.
Principal, okay. And then secondly, no doubt this is too literal of a reading, but when we talk about inside millage, didn't we use that term on this slide? There's only 10 available. The city doesn't get to use all 10. I get the point about the overlapping subdivision millage, but I think other so it's the schools,
Inside millage.
library, et cetera. So I think we don't collect 7.11 in inside millage, right?
Inside millage and indirect debt are related, but not exactly the same. This is your. We're talking about your 10 mil limitation. Then there's 10 mil. It's slightly.
So
different.
I'm confusing terms here. Okay, so the 10 mil limitation
Is what
Thank
you're
you.
talking about.
You've got
You're
it.
talking
You've got
about
it on
the
future slide.
you're talking about the 10 mil limitation,
which is different than the inside.
which is different than the inside millage. But your understanding is correct of the 10 mil limitation in that you don't get all 10, right? Because of the other
Right.
districts. That's what you're
Right.
saying.
And so the point is that on this slide, we can come up with 7.12 mils from a mix of sources to be able to afford what it says on this slide, according to your analysis.
So this is not this isn't the same. There's affordability is a slight. This is the legal debt limit, which is slightly different. You could have a city who could have the debt capacity to issue and might not have the dedicated revenue. They're two different analyses.
Okay.
Does that help you?
I think you're giving the more correct version, but I think the answer to my question was probably yes, because we do have.
Because you have the sources that this was designed to protect.
Understood.
Plus you have additional.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
If I could follow up on that, just, too. So this is saying, so trying to take all this into consideration. So the 61 million in this whole chart is looking at what we would, if we approved everything as before us, then that would be as of that date in 2026 that all goes on. That would be the additional capacity. But then in 2027, 2028, and 2029, we're going to have additional sewer projects and other capital expenditures that we're going to be back here having this conversation, and that number is going to be different based on however much, right? I mean, it's going to change every...
It's going to change based on your new money every year, and every year we show you the same slide.
Right.
And we calculate based on the current AV, based on your current borrowing plans. And, you know, the one factor that does change is your overlappers. They don't tend to change drastically, but they, you know, that amount can change slightly from year to year as well. So there are all of those factors that we will look at, and we'll show you the slide next. You know, this is not a slide that's ever going to be removed from this presentation, and we've had it in every year.
And then, so, and I understand too, is the difference between the state of Ohio saying what we can legally do and what is maybe a best practice and recommended to do in terms of that. So I guess that's where I'm sort of, I don't know if this is there a best practice? And I know that also goes into our rating, and we've had that conversation before too, but like, is there sort of best practice limitation that's different than what we're seeing on this slide, if that question makes sense?
It does, yeah. No, that's a great question. And the best answer for that question is there's not really a best practice per se for sort of for debt limits in general, because cities are so different in terms of how they pay for their debt. So there's not really a direct best practice we could point you to say, hey, as long as we're within this range. Instead, what we try to do is, and we think this actually works a little bit better, is tailor it specific to the city of Lakewood and say, as long as we can forecast that we have revenues sufficient in the water sewer fund, right, forecasted out to pay the debt service affiliated with those projects, and as long as we have revenue in the bond retirement fund, right, forecasted out, and that fund's getting every year it takes advantage because it's getting millage, property taxes put into that fund, right, just for debt service, transferred in ultimately, and as long as those revenues are going up and are able to support the projects, right, that we're assigning them to essentially, then really that's the best practice we would argue for the city of Lakewood, because we're showing exactly how it's getting paid, where it's getting paid from, and it's not affecting public safety, it's not affecting, you know, other general operations of the city. So that's a great question around, you know, how do we know what's really best for us? And so that's what we're trying to explain, is like that's how we're looking at it, to make sure that we find and we can assign revenue that's coming in, which by the way can only be used for debt service, right? That millage you're collecting, right? Not all your property tax millage, but there's a specific dedicated amount of property tax millage that goes ultimately into your debt service fund, your bond retirement fund, and it's by your charter only allowed to be used for debt service for capital projects. And so that's what we're focused on, right? Because you can't use it elsewhere.
Yeah, I have one more and then I'll. So, and on that, so then you were talking before about how we have these categories, we have to draft it up, how the legislation is drafted up in the different categories of sewer improvements, water, you know, general, and then and we have certain funding funds for those that are connected that make sense to those. But then when Vice President Baker was asking too about when the notes are that we're saying this is, I'm not going to use the correct language, general obligation.
Yes. Yeah.
So we can pay from it. We have to use our debt service, that part of our millage for debt, but the other things, we can pay for it from those funds, but we're not legally obligated to. That's just something that we do because that's our plan, but
That's
not,
right.
is that
That's
correct?
Right. Yes,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a general obligation, which means you're pledging everything as a city, but then you have your specific plan on how you're really making those payments, right? And so at the end of the day, general obligation more relates to, you know, property taxes.
Sure.
But you're not being forced. You don't have to pay every single piece of your debt service through property taxes. To your point, like you can pay the projects that are water sewer projects from water sewer, you know, revenues. So yes, your understanding is correct.
But to that point too is, other than the debt service, which is dedicated to paying for this, other thing, so if other revenue sources are they required to be used? So for instance, I mean, we've talked over the years of the challenges with water sewer rates to be able to pay for all of our water sewer projects, and that's a challenging thing because of water usage going down, et cetera, and our sewer rates sewer projects going up. But theoretically, we could use money from that to pay for other of the general obligation. It wouldn't have to go to the water sewer part of the debt. Am I saying that correct? I see Director Mahoney. I'm not sure if I'm articulating that well. I'm not saying we should do that. I just want to know what
I think what you're trying to get at is, could we use the property tax that we earmark to pay debt service? Could that go towards water sewer debt service? Is that, or am I saying that backwards?
I guess what I'm wondering is, we have this split up in the legislation that creates this, but then it goes to general obligation, and then we can pay whichever part of it from wherever part of it. Is that?
Yeah, isn't it based on
The type of project.
the type of project
Yeah,
and the
so
life, more
you can
than where
go-
you're paying from it?
Yeah, you can go one way but not the other. Like
Right.
you can use your property tax to pay for water sewer,
Right.
but you can't use your water sewer revenues to pay for general improvements.
That's okay. That's what I was looking
Your
for.
water
Yep.
sewer funds, it's a funding issue. Your water sewer funds are special funds, and they're very limited. Whereas like your general fund is not limited,
Right.
right? I mean, there are certain, so you have to look at each fund and see what it can be used for.
Right. Okay. That's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yep.
Vice President Baker.
I was curious, I've always been curious, is Lakewood unique in the debt service? Did we just have someone on bond council that was on our charter commission 100 years ago that
That's a
really
great
wanted?
question. Yeah, I don't know if you did. It seems like you did, because I would argue, or not argue, I would suggest Lakewood is somewhat unique in that it was very well planned out when the charter was originally drafted to dedicate revenue sources towards capital debt, knowing that the city of Lakewood's a sizable community, and over time, right, we're an inner ring suburb, so we're going to have improvements that we have to make, and we also have a diverse population that we have to serve, so we can't be affecting our operations. We got to serve people too, and so I would say yes, you are unique, and that's sort of, I wouldn't even say the challenge, but that's a big part of when we talk to the rating agency, making sure they understand that, because they're not seeing that for the most part. So yes, unique in a good way, and the group that was a part of that really I think did a great job looking forward. All right, so moving forward, the next page, we don't have to really spend time on it. It just shows the timeline. I just wanted to make sure you're aware. The note doesn't come due till April. I know we're sitting here in January, but we still do deal with the rating side of things, right? So we just need to make sure that there's time, and we need to make sure we can tell the parties that are involved in the rating side of this what exactly we're going to be funding, right? So that's why we're starting early. I don't want you to think, there's, like, we need to know what we're going to fund this year and have time to work it out on the credit side before everything comes due in April. So that's why we're starting the process now in January. That's all, from a schedule standpoint. And then that just really leaves the credit rating side. And if you skip to page 19, on the right side of the page, and I know you've seen a lot of this, but right first of all, there's three credit rating agencies in general. There's more than that, but the three major ones that are most popular for municipalities are Moody's, S&P, and Fitch. You don't need all three. You only really need one. Moody's just happened to be historically the agency that has rated the city's debt. And as you can see, the rating for the most part over the history of the city of Lakewood has sort of been in that AA2 category. And so that's a pretty fresh rating. In fact, they just came back, it might be on the next page. Yeah, so Moody's published something 2 years ago and then reaffirmed the city's rating last year at that AA2 rating without even, a big presentation from the city. Like, they'll just sort of look at the city's financial statements from year to year, make sure everything's sort of on track. And so that AA2 rating is a fresh, very good rating. And I will tell you, the median rating for cities across the country fluctuates from year to year from either A+ or AA3, which is at least one notch below you, sometimes two. So you're, despite, and I don't, when I say this, it's not a negative, but we talk about this every year. One of the strengths of Lakewood, right, is our diversity, and that includes socioeconomic, right? At the same time, we have to make sure we're serving the population, right? And we don't have like the tax base necessarily of the city of Westlake, right? We don't have wide open land for businesses, and that's not a slight against Westlake. It's just we don't have tons of land available for commercial development, right? And so we have to be very prudent about where you spend your dollars and your reserves and how you budget in order to maintain that credit rating. And you all have done a wonderful job in your position of overseeing that, and the administration and the finance team have done a fantastic job in sort of making sure shepherding that from year to year. So that's a big part of why you still have that AA2 rating. And you can see that on page 20, just from the commentary that, like, we won't dive into anything here, but just the commentary that Moody's says around the city specifically. What leads us to that, and we're wrapping up, I promise, in less than 2 minutes. Page 21 just shows the historical performance of your municipal income tax. Obviously, cities, their main revenue source are income tax. And so this is a wonderful trend to see income tax continuing to grow in the city. Page 22 just shows sort of where your millage is coming from, right? It just shows the different amounts of millage and what it is assigned to. And whether that's, and Councilman Bullock, this is where you probably saw the inside millage listed here. That's where that comes from versus the charter millage. But at the end of the day, this is all basically property tax millage that the city gets. And then honestly, probably most importantly is the last page. And this is, again, wonderful to see. There's two boxes here. The general fund, right? And these are the property taxes that go into the general fund for your general operations. It's not the totality of what funds your general fund, right? You get income tax in there too. But you can see that the property taxes are going up every year as your assessed valuation goes up. But from a debt perspective, this goes back to when we started the discussion tonight. We looked at the debt profile and the debt service, principal and interest on your debt coming down over time. And the flip side of that is the revenue side, right? Your water sewer funds are in good shape. You're in very good shape on those funds. You get water sewer fees. There might even be a little millage, I think, that goes into that as well. So you have the money to do those projects, right? And that's really critical, because as an older community, you need to make sure that you're keeping up with the maintenance and capital on that side. On the general capital improvement side, page 23 shows at the bottom the bond retirement fund. And that's where we're grabbing dollars to pay the general capital needs of the city and the debt service that goes along with that. And as you can see, it too has been going up, including hitting a very nice $6 million figure in 2025, right? And so keep in mind that when we talk about like a new borrowing, the new borrowing is layered in to take into effect the decrease in overall debt of the city from year to year, and also the increase in revenues that are going up, right? So that we can balance it out and make sure that the city has those sources of money to pay the debt. And so we're obviously in I don't want to say constant contact, but in-depth contact with the city's financial team to monitor that and look at that from year to year.
So if I read this correctly, the bond retirement fund at $6 million for 2025, technically, if we only had $5 million worth of like payment obligations,
Yep.
we just that would have to stay in the fund and carry over because it's charter kind of bound to that purpose?
You cannot use it for anything else.
Okay. No, I was just, because I like it. It's interesting that our charter basically makes us have debt, but it's interesting.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right, right.
The one other thing that probably could have been on this is that, and Jeff mentioned it, that we do have a property tax millage for sewer as well, and that's $3.5 million that brings in for, it's not specifically tied to debt, but that is a significant source for paying the sewer debt.
So maybe the answer's on the previous slide, but what's the total dollars that's going to pay debt? Can we go back one slide to page 22? So there's a couple ways to answer that question. So debt service 3.47 millage, inside millage, and then the sewer/general capital, I believe, is going to debt, correct? But not the other things on there.
The sewer could be to debt, I mean, but
it may not
provides,
be for
yeah,
some, for
right,
all of it, right?
right.
Because
But
some
the
might
debt
be.
service has to go to pay debt.
I understand. So my real question is, and I know we can find this in the budget book, but maybe just save time right now. How much would we pay in 2026 for debt service if we were to pass everything as currently drafted? So it'd be, the sources would be 3.47 plus 2, more or less, in the millage. I recall we also agreed to the administration's proposal for year-end transfers from 2025 general fund to put a very significant amount towards debt as well. So we're having some general fund cash underwriting some of the debt, at least for this past, the transition from 25 to 26. And so what's the total number that would be paid to support the total PAR? See, I'm trying to.
Yeah, I guess
use the
two things. Let me
terminology.
jump in here. I think what you may be thinking about in terms of the general fund transfers could be a transfer of dollars that have to go to debt service, right? Like the city's not supplementing operating funds for the debt.
The other way around.
Right?
No.
So what you may see from time to time transfers between funds, but it's going to be transfers of the dollars that have to go to pay debt service. So I want to make sure you know that. But what you asked was the total debt service for 2026 is going to be about 8.6 million, between 8.6 and 8.7 million. That's down from 9.1 million last year. And then in 2027, it's going to drop to 8.3 million.
So we can find that on page, what, 5? Or,
Seven.
No,
Seven, page 7.
but not entirely because we don't have the notes in there, right? That's only a bond
Yeah,
schedule.
that's right. That's the city's long-term debt. And so what we
So when you
always
add
look at
notes-
is keeping it in notes and then bonding it out as the debt service comes down, right?
Right, so if we added the cost of issuing notes and financing notes, that would raise the total above the 8.5 million, right?
It would.
So do
yeah.
we know that number?
Well, we do have, there's $1 million of interest coming due, but the principal will get rolled over. So you're not going to have a big principal payment until ultimately we put that note into bonds.
So the answer is 8.6 plus roughly $1 million to 9.6.
Yeah.
Okay.
For 2026, yes.
Okay, and Director Mahoney, it seemed like I confused you. What I recall was that year-end appropriations for 2025, we had surplus, or we had stronger than projected in the initial budget past the end of 2024. Looking forward to 12 months in the future, we had higher receipts, lower expenditures. So with that delta, with that pot, which is a good thing, we allocated certain ways. Some of that allocation did go to capital spending.
To capital, yes.
Okay,
No,
so that's-
not to debt.
Not to debt.
So, okay, so
Just
that's
to
a helpful
capital to
clarity.
save from future borrowings.
Okay, so what that would mean is what, 2026 capital to bring down everything in tonight's presentation, or
Yes.
something else.
Yes, it would have been higher had we not transferred some. We took some of the smaller projects and decided to pay cash for them this year.
Okay. I know about the number in the 2026 budget, but there was also some in the 2025 and year-end appropriations as well, weren't there?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
We transferred some cash to pay for some capital, yes, instead of debting it out.
Okay. So, all right, so there's a mix of sources. I don't know, Jeff, if you were aware of that, but that's part of, I was recalling conversations we had here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just responding to that it wasn't debt, right? So the city
Okay.
didn't do that, doesn't do that to pay its debt. But it's a great practice where if you have some extra dollars and they're not going to impact like your reserves, that you take some of that and just like you might do with your household budget, right? You might pay a couple of projects you have rather than putting it on a credit card, for example.
Yep, understood. So thank you for that distinction and precise usage of terms of art. So I guess one evaluation here, as I'm looking in the budget book, which we don't have on the slides tonight, but in 10 years, we've doubled the valuation of the city of Lakewood from around $850 million to what you're showing on page, we've lost it now, but if we went to the
1.781.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay,
I mean,
and there's
even-
been a lot of conversations outside of tonight's debt financing discussion where we're feeling the positives of that because we have inside millage and we have other things where you see an increase. In fact, we're not like the schools at all. So the chartered millage for sewer and general capital at 2 mills, that, am I correct, that floats with the property value, right? Unlike a school. So all of the city's millage is going up, our collections are going up, and we're noticing that in other conversations all around Lakewood. So the strength of the balance sheet here, which we appreciate, is coming also at a cost that we consistently hear about in the city of Lakewood. So what we afford with that is, to me, something we got to put careful thought to, because let's make the analogy of a family budget. If we've experienced an increase in our income, we think we can afford some capital. That doesn't mean we could buy new cars and refurbish the home and buy a vacation home. We're probably going to have to pick one of those. And we have the financial strength to pick one of those, which is better than it was years ago. But that's not quite the same thing as saying, we can commit to additional expensive projects in all areas of where we might wish. We probably have to be choiceful in that. And I'm conscious of the fact that increase in property valuation is strong in some ways, but people are feeling the carrying cost of that in other ways too. And a lot of that is coming from the way that we, and the city side as opposed to the school side, how we calculate our millage, or rather the fact that the state law, how that allows for millage to float with property valuation, which is distinct from the way school finance works.
Other council members, questions? I did have a question. We've heard a lot, as Councilmember Bullock was alluding to, with some of these movements regarding reconstructing how property tax is handled. Is there concern as we in sort of debt market about, if any of those bills were to pass, it would have very devastating effects on everything we do here, but certainly in terms of our rating and our ability to pay back and all sorts of things. So I just wondered if you have any thoughts you could share. Is there any concern about that? Is there nervousness? Any thoughts? No, obviously, I know Director Mahoney's nervous. We're all nervous, but but I mean, from in terms of the markets or in terms of what you're hearing.
As you said, it would be really devastating. We would be shut down. So.
I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind is the effect would be the same for all, right? This isn't the city of Lakewood alone. Like, this would be all cities throughout Ohio. And Maybe there's legislators throughout Ohio that feel differently, but it seems as you get even more centered, even with this governor, it seems like he recognizes that. Now I know he's not going to be governor anymore, but the consequences to all Ohio municipalities and all Ohio school districts is so dramatic that it's just very hard to believe that they're not going to be able to take some of that into consideration. Like the flip side of the proposal was if you do something like that, then the state needs to make up for that money, right, to the local. Now that's I know easily said than done, but there's such a dramatic effect to your point to all these municipalities throughout Ohio and all these school districts. And some cities are more Democrat than Republican, and vice versa. But all the cities are going to have the same effect. So it shouldn't be a partisan thing. It should be how are we going to properly manage, right, our funding of children and our services to the population, right? So it is absolutely something that we're all watching. It's some of us are even being pulled into, I don't know if lobbying is the right word, but educating, to make sure that folks understand what the ramifications of some of these things could be, and that there needs to be a plan in place, because you have to educate children and you have to properly service your constituents, your residents. So it is something we're all tracking, absolutely.
Yeah, I think for me, it's less it's always a concern what happens to the State House, but it's also a concern with we've had folks here who are working on a ballot initiative directly to voters, and there's been some, studies suggesting that it could pass if it went directly to voters. So it's just something thinking about, like, whatever debt we take out, it's our debt, even if these catastrophic things happen. So it's just something I've been thinking about and wondering if it's something that that you're thinking about on your end and folks purchasing our debt.
Yep.
Actually, I heard something recently that so property tax the bill is given to you, and it's high, but can you tell me how much you paid in sales tax last year? So it's because of that shock factor that people, I think, are so pegged to change it. But if you got rid of property tax, you would have to have a sales tax or income tax to help pay for those same things. So you're just going to replace one tax with another if these people have any success, unfortunately, with their.
Yeah, and sales tax would hit you harder. It would hit the lower. It would be more regressive. So
Right.
hit the people that can least afford it harder. So.
Right.
Anyway, that's a whole other topic. Yes, Councilwoman Hamilton-Steiner.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that's to your point and what you were speaking on, and the fear of the property tax. And I think last year, I don't think people were taking it as serious, but I certainly was, because I was following online chatters and having conversations. And I think we have to recognize, all of us in this room, all of us council members, and the administration, we have to recognize that there is frustration and anger behind why people are moving in that direction and supporting that. And to Councilman Bullock's point about, people are struggling to put food on the table, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, buy medication, pay for childcare, pay for their health care. And so we have to be conscious and aware of that and be prudent and responsible in how we spend essentially their money, our money, the people's money. And we have to also do a lot of education in how their income tax is being spent in the city, and how the property taxes are being used, and how we're spending it, and that they are getting value out of it. And we have to make sure that they see that value and that they feel that value. And so I think that's on us, that's on all of us in this room, because yes, we can say we can afford this, that, or another, but affording something and going out and doing that when people are struggling, I think is completely different. I think if we were in different times, we wouldn't necessarily be having this conversation, but I think it's an important conversation, and I think we just have to be conscious and aware of that moving forward.
Thank you. All right, any other questions, comments from council members? I had one more. I alluded to this earlier, but obviously this is putting together. Thank you for the great presentation and answering all this. You know, every year I learn a lot, and then I have to be re-educated again when you come back, and refreshed again. But there's a lot to take in. But you all explain it in a way that's digestible. So thank you. But I do have a question. So I was looking through. You know, we're with our sewer work. We have, you know, with our IWIP plan, and you know, so we have some more. We have sort of broken into chunks, and in the things that are coming up in 2027 and 2028. So those obviously are not considered in this legislation before us. But as we're considering, you know, the ongoing debt load and bringing, you know, as we've see those numbers go down. When I was asking before about best practices, is that something that you look at as you're thinking about all of this? You know, I know Director Mahoney's thinking about it, of course, but in terms of thinking about, and like I remember in 2021, we allocated $25 million of ARPA dollars thinking like, oh, we're going to get ahead on our sewer stuff, and then we found out we had to reline the whole Interceptor tunnel for $26 million, and so we sort of didn't get ahead like we thought we were going to. So anyway, that's a long intro to like how are we thinking about that in terms of future years and debt load.
Yeah, so that's why we have the 5-year capital plan, and we project this out and our ability to pay for future projects too.
I pulled up what we had, what we had projected that I think came from last year for 2026, and what was projected from last year on the new money was $32 million. So I mean, it's also a moving target, but actually the 27 million is under that, and so every year there is a 5-year capital plan. There is this, but then you look at it again in fall to finalize the projects and fine tune it.
And that plan does assign the revenues to it, right? So that the city can plan for what they, need to do and how it gets funded. Your point about being cognizant of the public is a great one too. So we're showing you that the city has the dollars to fund this, but you all collectively obviously are talking policy, and that's not right. That's not Catherine and myself. So, but we also are happy to always serve as a resource. You mentioned about education. If there's anything we can ever do to be helpful in the community, or some type of meeting where we can help answer questions or educate folks, we're happy to do that. Don't hesitate to call on us to help if we can, or if it's helpful to you.
Yeah, and hopefully we won't have another $25 million sewer surprise. So we hope. All right. Any other questions? If not, then thank you very much. I'm going to suggest we take a couple-minute break here, and then we'll move on to the administration's presentation. So maybe 3 minutes. Is that fair?
Do you need
We'll do whatever you want. We're fine either way.
Oh, you used to live here in Lakewood. Oh.
Yeah, I don't think I've.
Which jurisdictions?
Anyway, that's all.
Yeah. If there is, you know, if you want to.
Yes, it's. Thank you so much.
They're on the ballot for new levy, and that's new. Outside of
I don't know. That's a big thing too. So they're not wrong to from their perspective. There's a second tour. I'm not sure that will affect the city of Lakewood. So that's where I started questioning. They have a little bit of insight. So the whole big thing, everybody's interpreting.
This is fun. This is one of my favorite meetings of the year. I almost feel like
All right, are we good to get back going here? So, all right, the other item on our agenda for tonight is to hear from the administration about the proposal for City Hall. So I'll turn over Mayor George or whoever on the team wants to get started.
Thank you, Madam President, Vice President Baker. Welcome, Councilman Bixenstein. I look forward to working with you and welcome aboard. I also think it's a good starting point to say, obviously, there's going to be a lot of new information here, and it goes for all 7. Any questions that you may have, whether new, old, please reach out to any of us or the developer or finance, whatever the case may be, law. We'll do the best to get you the answers as quickly as we can. I would say this as a starting point. This is kind of a tale that has been not passed down through generations of mayors and councils, but I think that what we're about to talk about is a hard topic. It's a difficult topic. I think if it was an easy one to solve for, it would have been solved already. I think this is one that collectively, just like we did with the Casto deal in downtown development, we worked over time, we worked together to try to come up with a product and a process that served the citizens of Lakewood as best we could, both in terms of fiscal responsibility, but also making sure that we have a project that serves the people for generations to come. That's the starting point from this analysis from our side of the table. The fundamental, I guess, 3 points that we set forth our analysis are as follows. The number one is the superior customer service element of what we do and what is best for the city and what is best for its residents, citizens, visitors as well. The central location of the heart of downtown, the corner of Main and Main, is something that is important. We think that having a central downtown city hall where the administration would inhabit, directly served by the multiple transit routes, north, south, east, and west, is a good one. And it matches a lot of the values that we've talked about over many different topics over the last 5 years since I've been here. The fourth bullet point, I think, is one of the most critical ones, because to anyone who comes to City Hall, pulls permits, pays bills, whatever it may be, at present they have to often hopscotch across the street. And we want to consolidate the customer-facing departments into one central location. We think that is what's best for efficiency. We think it helps business owners, construction, anybody really from a permit basis. The second point is maybe greater than the first, though, the equitable employee facilities. As you'll see in a future slide, the genesis of how this came about is the analysis of our police, courts, safety forces generally. We know that we're behind the curve as it relates to square feet per officer. We're behind the curve as it relates to the facilities needed with the new growing number of female police officers. And I also think it's important to note that the courts have also expressed a need, and that's kind of gone by the wayside in recent times as far as just dialogue. But you can rest assured that Judge Neff is watching this as well, because it's an important thing to the courts and their ability to have stable security and all the things that we need in the 21st century that we face, you know, with the world we live in. The last point is one I've had many back and forth with many of you on many topics over years, and that's the competitive nature of us as a city recruiting and retaining talent, employees generally. It doesn't matter if you're working metro parks, or if you're working in the private sector, if you're doing this in a mom and pop business. We're in the same world. We need to keep our talent. We want to attract the talent. And when it comes to some of the spatial issues we face, namely the public safety side, as you know, it's a very, very competitive world in that area. And this is one of the things that started this entire deep dive. And I give the mayor credit on this, because as it relates to this project and this analysis and trying to come up with the best solution for the city of Lakewood, we are not in the business of kicking the can down the road. We're in the business of trying to find solutions. And I think we share a lot of the same collective thoughts on what we think the city needs. We can obviously have tremendous debate over the next couple weeks about what we may think is best or what we can improve upon. But I just want you to know that from my standpoint, what makes Lakewood great is not only its citizens and residents, but we have great employees, and we want to keep it that way. The last point is the first hour and a half of tonight, the fiscal stewardship pillar. Obviously, nothing gets done project-wise if it doesn't work fiscally. And that was what we were hoping, and hopefully it was conveyed to council as well as the public, that this decision has been analyzed through and through on the financial side to see if it works. One of the starting points I had is that when we first engaged Weaver Murphy Fox long ago, they brought up the build out on the northeast side. We've had discussion, namely Councilman Evans, I know you've had dialogue with others about the build out on the south face on the lawn. One of the issues I see, and we can discuss this more thoroughly, is as it relates to the ingress and egress of this building and turning this into an active construction site. I think the complexity of that is massive. I believe that the fact that this is the communications hub of the whole city, the dispatch, police, the courts, IT, to tie into an addition on the south face of this building and to maintain at all times 24/7, 365, both access and to ensure that communication can't waver for 10 seconds. Using that as a basis for comparison to what we're about to offer, if the price is about right, or if the price is very similar, to go downtown and to consolidate down there, I think that's a more compelling reason than to build out on the south face. But that's the way I look at this. The other bullet points listed here are essentially go to the same operational risks of such a build out. I think a lot of construction folks would tell you that it's actually a lot harder to build into an existing operational building like a hospital, like a city hall, like a jail, things of that nature that have to be functioning all the time, and the costs associated therewith on the build out of a phased approach like that to build an addition is a lot harder than simply going to another location. I also think there's a timeliness element to it too, to move downtown that would accelerate the timetable associated with getting the police and others the space they need. This is the police and courts slide. This is going back to the very beginning, trying to articulate for you the challenges faced by our police and the courts on a daily basis. I'll show you a slide in a second that has been, I call it the Angie Byington slide because it's a comparison of a lot of other cities in Northeast Ohio. But as you just read through, it's a lot of the things I said before as it relates to the police square footage, bringing them up to industry standards, as well as just comparing ourselves to our competitive cities that we are actively competing against as far as recruitment and retention of especially safety forces. On the court side, Judge Neff has reiterated lately that they need more functional space for a lot of different reasons, but a lot of it has to do with security risks and also hearing rooms for magistrates and other court staff, as well as secure parking for said staff. This is the chart of all charts in my mind. This is the chart that compares Lakewood to 10 other Northeast Ohio cities. And if you look at the lowest left-hand box there, Lakewood on a square feet per staff as it relates to the police station is woefully below many of our competitors. It's not anybody's fault. It's just it's a byproduct of the growth of the police force in this town, as well as the overall employee count, and the fact that this space really hasn't been touched since 1958. Many other cities to the right, like Rocky River and all that, we know that they've made the investment as of late, and that's what we're seeking to do. So here's our idea, 1470 Warren Road, the old Board of Education site. We see this as a once-in-a-generation opportunity for us. This opportunity to move into a downtown historic building does not come along very often. The cost, certainty, and fiscal responsibility of making such a move. We wouldn't be here if we didn't think we could get it done from a pricing perspective. We've heard from others what they predicted the price point could be. In talking to the developer who's here tonight, We think we can do better, and we think we can do so in a manner that protects the city. The goal goes back to the very first slide, to consolidate, to make it a one-stop civic hub for our residents and businesses, to centralize the access, to make it easier for them to get to City Hall. We think we can improve on many of the wayfinding, accessibility, and quality of service components. We know we can modernize some of the customer service from the current 1958 look we have here. It would reduce the resident trips and internal handoffs as it relates to the permitting process, which is what I explained before, jumping across the street, going between floors of the buildings to try to get business done. One of the other key components that we've talked about before is the flexibility and growth. This plan allows for us to grow as well, in the sense of we have all the administrative departments under the one roof. We know that our police force is always evolving, changing with the times, and we know most acutely with the female number of police officers we have that we need to make changes today, yesterday. We can do that quickly, and we can give ourselves the opportunity, in my opinion, to align ourselves with a lot of our other competitor cities that already have the City Hall Justice Center dual campus model. Most of the cities in Ohio of our size, larger and even a little bit smaller than us, use the split campus model. So we're not trying to invent something new. The last point is another one, it's the transportation component. We see this as it's a centralization, multimodal hub downtown. Walking, transit, biking, driving is easier than getting to this end of town. We have the RTA bus lines going north, south, east, west. It aligns with some of the major components of the active transportation plan. Of course, it's the walkability factor downtown as well. And again, I reiterate, it's consistent with what other cities of our size across the state of Ohio already do. Lastly, and perhaps is one of the major fundamental things that makes Lakewood a great town, is that there's a lot of love and desire to adaptively reuse historic downtown buildings. We famously dealt with it quite a bit in the downtown Casto project with the Curtis Block. That struck me when I first came to Lakewood, that this city has a passion for that. This is the core of that. We are going into one of the most historic buildings that remains in the downtown core, and we're seeking to repurpose it and make it our city hall. The municipal investment alignment with the adopted preservation and sustainability goals are things we talk about in almost every meeting I go to with respect to many of the community members and different organizations around town, Lakewood Alive being the most prominent, I would say, on that. But I firmly believe that there's a downtown hub, city hall model that keeps the Justice Center here, courts, and the police in an ever-expanding footprint space here will serve the residents of the city of Lakewood the best. I'll leave questions to you guys as well right here if you want to go over anything I just stated, but I have Drew Siley and Tom Cloris from Liberty here to have any comments based upon that presentation. Thank you.
Council members, questions, comments at this time? Yeah, we can, if we want to. Drew, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam President, members of council. Again, Drew Siley, Liberty Development. Tom Cloris, the CEO and founder of Liberty Development, and also a lifelong Lakewood resident here with me tonight. I know we have a committee meeting next Monday, but we just want to kind of give a preview to that and share our commitment to this process. So thank you for considering this proposal. You know, the conversation that just happened about fiscal stewardship, fiscal responsibility, that's council's job. That's your mandate. And to Councilperson Hamilton Steiner's comment about the people's money, you know, as we were working our way through a process that was laid out where we submitted our qualifications and the work that council did with Weber Murphy Fox and PMC, we thought we had an opportunity to introduce a compelling story. and that what we're offering is a transparent process, open book, to have a conversation with council about how we arrived at the proposal we have in front of you right now. We're confident we can deliver the project we've described that gives you a high-quality, durable asset. This isn't a value-engineered kind of project. It's a high-quality, durable asset, and that we can draw some distinctions between the effort that was previously done, which I think Weber, Murphy, Fox, and PMC did an admirable job considering the constraints. They were working from existing condition floor plans in a very compressed timeline. They were using their professional acumen to develop a budget as their professional responsibility requires that would cover that project and then some. But the team that we're going to have here next week, so we're including our design team, the contractors that we would work with, that we've worked with a number of times that were, as we demonstrated in our previously submitted qualifications, to answer detailed questions. So we're ready to have that conversation with council. We're ready for you to stress test our proposal. Let's get into those details, ask those questions. We have suggestions on how we think the city could and should protect itself in this process. We have no expectation that this is close to the vest, closed book kind of situation. This is something that we come to agreement on exactly what we're going to deliver and at what price. And so the analogy I would use, not to oversimplify it, but it will somewhat, is if you were going to buy a car from us, and you outlined all the features you wanted in that car, and we didn't deliver on that. You asked for a sunroof, and the day of the delivery of that car, it doesn't have a sunroof. You don't have to buy the car. We're talking about a similar process, more complicated, obviously, but we are going to go at risk and certify a project once we agree to final design, and we'll be able to walk you through exactly all of our assumptions that we made to get to that price. But if we don't deliver on what we said at any point in the process or in the final product, the community is not required to buy that building from us. But that's where we want to get to. We want to get to something that is going to serve this community well. That's also going to be part of our conversation next week. This isn't just about the dollars and cents, though that leads. It's about the qualitative experience. I think you'll see a notable distinction as we've designed a floor plan, we've designed a layout to make that one-stop shop, to solve what we think is knowingly solving the problems that are, from a customer service standpoint with this building, that you can enter one floor of that building and all of the customer-facing departments are right there. We're going to go through some pains to walk through that design, to actually show all the members of council exactly what we're talking about, what we mean. And then lastly, and then I'm happy to answer any questions council might have, we have a 3D model, a live, real version of what we're talking about, the quality design in the building adjacent to 1470, 1456. We renovated that with council support. We fully leased that building. I'd invite any council members who want to visit that and see exactly what we're talking about as level of finish, quality of construction, energy efficiency, historic preservation, all the pieces that we embedded in that process. We plan to do the same thing for the building adjacent and hopefully deliver a quality administrative city hall for this community. So thank you for hearing us. We look forward to next week's conversation. We're very prepared to have that discussion and happy to answer any questions council might have tonight. So thank you.
All right, council members. Yep, come on up, Tim.
If you don't mind, Drew's running this project. Tom Kalouris, CEO of Liberty Development. I just want to make sure that you know very clearly, I'm a 60-year resident of Lakewood. I started this business 30 years ago. Really proud of a lot of projects we've done, but there's not much that means more to me than what we do here. McKinley Place, those townhomes, every time I drive by them. That's where I went to elementary school, by the way. We developed and owned Cozumel. That's our building. There's other things that we've done. This is the small building, the one to the north. We promised the school district, we were the only ones to promise the school district that we would rehabilitate that in a historic tax manner, or a historic manner, and we did. Love it. We've got there's some Lakewood residents working in there, and there's some people that come from out of, but what I just want you to understand that besides all of this fiscal responsibility and how well this fits, as a Lakewood resident, as somebody that's going to look back on this, I'm raising 4 kids here. They're all growing up here. Their mother is from the east side, so I sold this place, and we chose to stay here on purpose and love it. My wife's become a huge resident, more friends here than I do. A project of this kind in a partnership with you, there is not anything more important than what we're doing. Not to me. I'm not going anywhere. We fully intend to continue to raise our kids here and stay here. So the soft part of that is this means more to me than a project. If there's anybody that has any issues, or there's always problems to solve, by the way. Everything's difficult. That's kind of the best part of our business because it keeps a lot of people out. We will solve those problems together. And there certainly isn't ever going to be a time that you should have a question in your mind wondering what we're thinking unless you haven't asked it or we don't know it somehow. This is about getting something done that has felt to me like when it was proposed to me, because this was not my original idea, has been perfect. And or it could be made as close to perfect as you can get. Just want you to understand this goes way beyond a project for me, and that you should please feel free to use that in any way you want. Okay? Thank you.
Okay. So thank you. I think unless other council members have questions at this time, I'd like to chat a little bit about how we the plans for next week. So are we thinking, I know, I'm not sure how much council members really at this time understand what exactly is, we understand the building, but like what exactly is being proposed. So what's the plan for next week in terms of presentation?
I don't know if you want to join in on this too. I don't want to misspeak. I mean, the plan is to get down and dirty with respect to at this stage, we've had a fit plan. We've had discussions with city departments over time, but I think what the goal at the next meeting is to illustrate to you what the idea is. Today was more the why, and then Drew can, with his professional team coming into to City Hall next week, we can start to both elucidate and have back and forth with you on different ideas as it relates to what is possible.
Yeah, Council President, I think in my mind, and please disabuse me of this, we were going to take a couple steps back to kind of level set on making sure we're talking about the same terms, what we meant. That's why we're going to spend some time talking about the design, the interaction we had with the different departments in City Hall, how we looked at some of the floor plan related to workflow, customer experience, and then tie that right into our costs, how we came to the costs we're talking about, and then the full scope of what we're suggesting is being delivered for that cost. So that the idea would be, as a point of beginning, that council members walk out with a very good orientation of the details of our proposal, and then we'll be prepared to have any follow-up we need to have after that.
So, I guess in terms of the why presentation, it's sort of the conversation we've had. Is like I think we've all been on the same page. We've had multiple communications. We all recognize the need to solve for the space issues. So, I'm looking for is, are we, is some conversation about process. So I know we had conversation about one of the other meetings about we had an opinion from legal counsel about whether we can, or whether or how we can jump right into what is being proposed. Are we talking about, last week we had the conversation about procedures and different types of design process. So that's what I'm kind of like, what are the legals, what are we talking about in terms of process steps?
Yes, so if I may, Council President. So today was just a very, very high-level introduction because we knew a lot of today would be spent with the bond council. So we wanted to be mindful of timing. So just that high-level introduction, then get into the details of, again, the design, the costs, and then we can provide some additional information on how we got there in terms of this legally and how that works out.
Vice President Baker.
Thank you, and thank you, Tom and Drew, for coming. I see you at church sometimes, Tom. What I'm trying to, and I'm project delivery models, cogents, front of my mind, and I'm hearing the design. And I looked through the folder again, and perhaps there's more, kind of the shared folder that Director Byington put together. The only thing I see in our name is a Phase 1 ESA. Do we have a facilities assessment, an appraisal? Do we have an architect under contract that's looking at this building beyond Weber Murphy Fox's kind of high-level boxing plan?
I don't want to misspeak on who. So Burrari Architects and others on the team with respect to Liberty have been looking at this building for a long time. And I would say, in direct answer to your question, we've been trying to figure out, can we get this thing done? And that's been the baseline question that has been the overarching theme since this summertime. Only in recent times have we, I would say since the Weber Murphy Fox presentation along with PMC, where they came in and gave us a figure that was, through their analysis, that was the starting point for us to figure out, can we do this? Because it was only through that lens that we were able to figure out that the developer has the ability to put together a proposal that obviously we have to negotiate and agree with and go through the whole step of trying to figure out if it works, both from a design, the whole thing, operations, but that is the window that gave us the opportunity to be where we are today on this project. And that's how this all began. It was basically in the aftermath of that meeting. I don't want to, we talked, Drew came and stated basically that the costs that were set forth before us were obviously a lot of hypothetical contingency upon contingency type numbers. We can do better. And that's the starting point of where, that was only 2 months ago. So from that point to today is what this conversation is. But we have to move forward at some point because they're going to walk away.
So, Council President, if I may. So to the Vice President's question, what we're also bringing to the table, Councilman, is where all that documentation that we have, measure drawings, asbestos surveys, environmental assessments, structural analysis, we're putting that in as part of making that all available to Council as a point of beginning on this conversation to share our design team. To your comment about product delivery or project delivery, how we do that, I understand the point. There are a number of ways we could potentially do that. That's part of what we want to discuss next week. We know that our team is very familiar with a range of delivery models. I think the intent is, no matter what, that we're putting in a model that's or using a model or a methodology that is protecting the city, protecting the administration and council's interests, but also delivering exactly what you're asking for with the highest quality, most timely, most cost-effective methodology. So that's part of what we're hoping to discuss next week.
Thank you. And if I may, we issued an RFQ for design builders on this building in the summer, right? And is that the qualifications you're talking about, Mr. Sutton?
Correct. We responded to that with the same team we're going to have here next week.
Okay. Because my challenge, and this is, we represent the city of Lakewood. We're the fiduciaries for the city of Lakewood. You represent Liberty Development. I think you're honest people. But typically in construction projects, there is some, right, and I appreciate the collaborative nature of kind of what you're presenting. The concern I have is that architects have a client, and that client typically pays them. And then contractors typically have a client, and they typically pay them. So the kind of alarm bells in my mind of project delivery and kind of how capital construction should go are at least ringing a little bit, as it seems like there may be an imbalance of information knowledge and reliance that the parties have, the parties being Liberty and the city of Lakewood. And to your
Councilman,
point,
not to cut you up, but I think that's a reasonable concern. And I think we're prepared to actually talk through how we might be able to mitigate some of those concerns and come to a fair balance on that gets you exactly the protections you're hoping for.
yeah, and then the other thing is just, the general nature of like public construction and bidding, right? And that's where I think we're being asked to decide this by February 16th or whatever the council meeting is after President's Day. There's a lot here. This development agreement, I'm presuming, is in draft form. I have, if it's not, I would like to see it at some point.
Councilman, if I may, so a lot of those features of a contract are not developed yet. We first want to have this meeting with City Council before we spend hours on developing that that purchase agreement and the formal development agreement. Our thought and our plan was to lay out the why, the rationale, the importance of this building, and get the go-ahead from council to begin to negotiate that contract.
Okay, because I think, and I don't want to, because this is, once again, you buy a property, you buy a building, the seller, you get into a contract with them, they can share reports with you, but you oftentimes want to get that report in your own name, right? You want to get your own facilities assessments. You want to get your own phase 1, phase 2. You want to be the reliance party on there, because if what they represent is incorrect, if Liberty shares it with us, we can't seek redress if there are material differences in those reports. And that's why you want those things in your name. That's why you'd want an appraisal to show the public that the value of this building is the value we're paying. And so those are the things that just concern me, and I hope we can, and that's, I think, skipping forward to, we've all agreed that this is the solution to our problems. Because I think that what we've talked about is that there's a shared understanding, at least I share the administration's understanding about the space issues with police and with the courts. What is a little troubling is I'd hope we'd have some professional, a little bit, like what Weber Murphy Fox did is a fit plan for City Hall, to have them do that level of analysis with, and that's where City Council was just trying to, through our exercise with I'm going on a lot of different tangents here because this is pretty discombobulating. But what City Council was trying to do with Weber Murphy Fox and project management consultants was to say, we can't even conceptualize what these costs would be from a scale perspective. And in construction, risk is priced in as dollars. And unknowns are risks, so unknowns are dollars. So to Mr. Siley, Mr. Caleres' point, they have more information and they probably can provide a better estimate as to what it would take to rehab that building. But the city could only rely on what we had, which was our work product from Weber Murphy Fox, with which to work with PMC to come up with those estimates. We also didn't have a ton of certainty on what a front addition would look like. So that risk was also baked into those analyses as well. And what I'm concerned about is that we're going to go into a process and say, council, because Weber Murphy Fox and PMC said that the front addition is this cost, and a party that we want a relationship with and trust, as collaborators, are saying they can do it for less, so then that's used as a justification to not go through public bidding. And so these are some of the concerns that I'm having as I'm hearing what is being discussed. And I hope that there's a presentation that allays me of those fears, because I don't know that we need another 12,000 feet of general office space in our overall City Hall campus. I think we need another 12,000 square feet of police space. And that, I think in all the plans that we've talked about have reflected that. But to get essentially 30,000 more square feet of under roof space for a city that has a tax base that's, while growing income tax wise, is not growing development wise. We don't have greenfields. We're not going to need, if anything, we need more public service garages and public, so that's where we're really far ahead here, and I don't know if we need to be here. And so I'm just expressing that to the administration, our partners, and my colleagues, that, but I will certainly listen next week. And hopefully we can have some rubrics of what that development agreement would look like, because it's going to have to accomplish a lot of things and allay a lot of fears, at least that I have as one of 7 members. Because I feel like we may be asked to vote on something where I will have only a little bit of the information with which to go on, and I don't feel like I can discharge my fiduciary duties to the taxpayers of Lakewood without having more information. And that's just me being honest, and I typically am brief when I speak, and typically am not as contemporaneous, but I just felt the need to say these things.
Councilmember Hamilton Steiner.
Thank you. Okay, so with the understanding that this was, we were doing the why, which is great. That's kind of how I like to process things. I just need more information and more clarification of how this particular decision fits the why. I don't think we've got in there. So building off of what Vice President Baker has said, we've come to this conclusion, but we've missed a lot in between. So going back to your first slide, primary goals, superior customer service. That's great. And then the next point is what is best for the city and its residents. And so for me, I think that is the question. What is best for the city and its residents, right? So I think that is what I want to see and how we got there. Because if you look at general public comments, I'm not hearing anything about City Hall. And I'm not saying that's how I'm going to make a decision, but I think it's important that I'm not hearing much about City Hall, that's what residents want. I hear housing affordability. I hear we need better measures for our streets. I hear that, with all the snow, people are, not very super happy right now with snow removal and sidewalks issues and things like that, right? So those are the things I'm hearing about. I'm hearing that they're struggling with healthcare and food insecurity, right? Those are the things I'm hearing. I'm not hearing anything about City Hall. So I think I need to hear how we got there to that point, that this is what's best for the city and its residents. Going to your next point about equitable employee facilities, and just, being a competitive employer and retaining employees. I want to know what are the things that we're doing to be competitive? What is our work from home and flexible work remote policies that exist? Are employees currently able to work from home 1 day a week, 2 days a week? Have we looked at expanding it to 5 days a week to be able to free up some of that space? So building back to Councilman Baker's point, that we might not need that much space, right? And so if we don't need that much space, we can be fiscally responsible by actually expanding and having a situation where we have the space that we need with potential to grow. And that's aside from, obviously, the police. I think, I don't want to speak for everyone. I know that there is a need for, I've gone in the tour, saw the facilities. We know that there's a need. No one is arguing that. So for me, it's how did we get that this is the decision and this is what is best for the city, its residents, and I have not quite seen that yet. And then I'm going to also steal Councilman Bullock's, something that he brings up. What does success look like, right? So I want to know what is best for the city and its residents, and what does success look like for this project, whatever it is that we decide what is success. So I want to I need to see all of that before we get to a decision that this is the decision and this is what we're doing.
Thank you. Councilmember Strebig.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation, everyone, the how and the why. I'm also very interested in the what, and I'm specifically interested in your slide number 5 that shows the square footage per employee, and sympathetic to the idea that we need equitable employee facilities. And I'm looking for the next step in this chart, where you're showing me we're at 179 square feet per staff right now, and with this addition, we go to what, right? Where do we go from here? Do we go up to 474 like Bay Village? Do we get close to, 236 like Euclid has? So when we look at this new building, does the finance department that's operating out of 2,000 square feet now, are they operating out of 3,000 square feet? If you could show me that, thank you, on a chart like this, with where our departments are now and where they will be, I think that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair. I think, thank you, Councilman Baker. I think you outlined a lot of the same concerns I have that we've had with this process, so I appreciate that. I think one of the major issues I have with this is that everything we're talking about still is based on a presupposed outcome that we need to move to Warren Road. We've touched on this, but I just am not seeing the background that's making the strongest case for that. And I also still, while we have an immediate need in front of us for space, and that's for our police department, our officers. And while this moves the needle towards getting to that solution, what we're talking about right now does not immediately solve that solution. And that's a tough thing for me. I mean, that's who I'm trying to find resources for right now. I mean, again, we did it yesterday, and doing this is not doing that yesterday. It's doing this entire project, moving people over, and then renovating this space. So that's just another of my concerns. I'm certainly looking forward to next week. I wish I could have more questions. I was hoping we'd get a little more detail today, but yeah, I like everyone here, we'll keep an open mind, but I'm definitely operating from a place of being a little worried about how the process has gone to this point, and again, thinking this is having this be the only solution that's ever really been given a lot of thought. Thanks.
Madam President, if I could just address that one question. I know when we discussed this in my conference room a few months back, that was certainly your concern, and it remains the concern now. And I think what we discussed then was the idea would be to move out the basement level staff either to another site so that we can open up that space on the ground floor immediately so that we can begin to address those immediate needs of the police department. So that would be the plan with this. The challenge with any sort of build out front would be you'd have to wait for that entire build to be completed before you'd be able to move out those staff. So hopefully that addresses that immediate concern about how quickly we can assist our police officers in getting them some additional space. And also to all the other questions, these are great questions. We're looking forward to answering them for you. If you have questions, what would be very helpful would be send those to us. I know, Council President Keppel, you had mentioned that before. We're waiting for questions. We're happy to answer them. That can help us fine-tune the presentation to tailor your needs and to make sure that your questions are being answered. So I jotted them down. We'll have our team review them, but if you want to send those our way, then we can tailor the presentation to make sure those questions are answered.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman.
So would you want those questions emailed just directly to you, John? Who should be on the email? Because I can certainly, so you have it as well. I can certainly email you the questions I asked.
Yes, send them to the mayor's office and John and Angie, and then we can begin to get those answered.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'll add to that, I guess, as we were going through, one of the questions that I have is in terms of the sort of capital outlay and the spending. So as we're talking about this with the bonds, and when you had Webb Murphy Fox and PMC here, and they talked about how 2026 would be more of a design year, typically, and 2027 be more of the expense for construction, and depending on the model that we would move forward with, that could look differently, but I'd like that part of the presentation discussed too, as well as the plan for building out the Justice Center. I think in the 5-year capital plan that significantly, it's maybe, we sort of had it, we had it in our presentation from Webb Murphy Fox and PMC of putting those numbers together for the totality of the project, because it's not just wouldn't just be building out Warren Road, it would also be renovating this building, which we continue to own. And so we know we have the existing things here, like the $3 million in windows that we'd have to do regardless, but then also renovating, turning what's building department and planning department into police space, et cetera. So what level of renovation we're talking about for if we were to move the administration, some of the administration to Warren Road, what level of renovation are we talking about for the police and justice or Justice Center solution? And you know, what that looks like. So that would be some of my question, and then also the capital outlay for all of those things. And because we are in, if we, and that's another question too, is in terms of if we've sort of packaged these things because the proposal, as I understand it, is would be using the 16.5 in the bonds legislation that we just talked about as part of that whole package. So if we, and the finance partners asked us to pass that by the February 17th meeting after President's Day. So we do have a short period of time if the idea is to expend that capital and go with this plan now. So that one of the other questions would be if council were not ready to do that at this time, given all that we're talking about right now, how that financing could work in the future. So those are some of my thoughts.
Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Just, I believe I can answer your first question now about the costs for redoing this building. So the dollar figure that was mentioned in my letter to council, kind of introducing this a couple weeks ago, we included the numbers from from PMC and Weber Murphy Fox for this building. So we included those numbers, and then the other piece of that was the numbers from Liberty Development to completely redo the 1470 Warren Road.
Okay, so then that goes back to when we had, so that's assuming the same level of renovation than that Webb Murphy Fox and PMC. So that was pretty low, right? Wasn't that mostly carpet? And but we can talk about that more.
There are, so in a construction project, and Mr. Shiley knows this, there are so many decision points that can affect a budget 20 to 30% up or 20 to 30% down. You know, whether you deal with issues today or you deal with them tomorrow, as an owner, you're eventually going to have to deal with them. Sorry, I didn't.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Mr. Siley.
If I could actually respond to your question, part of the delivery model we have in mind is an option here to address exactly what you're talking about on timing of debt that the city would incur, and how do you balance the phasing, potentially investing in the police department initially, right? So what we're talking about is a delivery model, to Councilman Baker's point, is we're going to certify dollars and we're going to go at risk. When we come to consensus on design and we say it's 16.25700, whatever that is, that's the contract to sell you that building. If we miscalculated and we're spending more than that, that's our risk. That's not coming back to the city and saying, oops, we had a miscalculation in here. We're also talking about a delivery model where you're buying that building in total turnkey at the end of the process. So for example, if 2026 is the design year and 27 and we're delivering the building, let's say in the first quarter of 28, just for discussion, that's when you're spending that money. In the interim, the money that you already have allocated in the budget, if we develop, and we can inform this process as far as timing, you're going to invest money in the police department, which is, I think, something you obviously you're thinking about now, or in 2026 or early 27. It allows for that to happen with the money you're already allocating potentially for physical plant capital improvements right now. So it's not trying to double down that you're incurring all those costs in the 2026 year, 2027, whatever that's going to be. It gives you some additional time to be able to anticipate other capital projects you may have and the level of investment you want to make in the police in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, or however you break up that redo of this building.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest, go ahead, Councilman Bullock.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mayor and team. And Mr. Koulouris, nice to officially meet you. I love what you said about getting people from the east side to the west side and putting down roots and having pride in your development. My kids love Cozumel, so there you go. And I hear you loud and clear about the pride of making it a pride project that you would want to drive past and feel proud of. So a couple thoughts. First, on this slide, this is not directed at Liberty, but the administration. I came up with a lower number than 130 total employees in the police department. I went through the recently adopted budget, and the max you get to is 127, and 3 of those are animal control officers. So they're not going to contemplate it to be in this headquarters. So I think the numbers are a little lower than what's showing on the slide. Secondly, on the bigger picture questions, I guess I do have some questions for Liberty, but the administration first, some feedback on the what and the why. It sounds as if the administration is saying that it's not just renovation of facilities and space and condition of facilities, but it's also, you're making it a major priority to have location in the downtown for accessibility and so on and so forth, if I'm hearing you correctly. So that's new. I mean, there's certainly arguments you could make there. How I've been thinking about this all along is that you'd want that same thing for the business tenants, the tax-generating business tenants of the Liberty properties, who right now are doing a beautiful job. And I did get the chance to take a tour with Mr. Siley last year of the building that is finished, and it's nicely done and is full. I drive by it all the time because my kids go to Grant Elementary to the rear. So all of the same benefits that we're discussing for potential City Hall operations could apply to tax-generating business tenants as well, and arguably the rent you can command within walking distance of downtown, plus the new Lakewood Hospital redevelopment and other potential spillover developments, will be higher than across the street in the annex. You know, it's a different plane. So from a financial strategy point of view, there's some opportunity costs.
Just to remind you, Councilman, there is a TIF and an abatement on that property.
On the
1470 as well as 1456 Warren property, yeah.
I do remember because
Okay.
we adopted that. So that's another feature I wasn't going to get into, but we owned it, we sold it, we granted a TIF, and now we're contemplating buying it back. That's a little bit of a difficult.
Well, sir, as you recall, it's just a formality within a TIF agreement, is that the city owns it for moments as we change hands. So that's just the normal process
true.
for a
We had
for
bought
a
it.
TIF.
We
There was
had-
never a time when the city truly owned and wanted to operate or use that facility. It was just part of the general procedure for a TIF. Just a reminder.
We held it for a while when we took it over from the Board of Education, and you know, it was a few years back, and so.
Yeah, Liberty bought it directly from the Board of Ed. So the city has never, outside of the brief time during the TIF process, the city's never owned that facility, that site.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for that correction. So I'm responding to the whys that we're talking about tonight, just some feedback from one council member. The complexities of construction are good things to anticipate. I don't see how those complexities of construction on this campus are avoided for any version of any project. There might be matters of degree, but if you're looking at managing construction of converting the current building to a justice center for the courts and the police, you'll still have the ingress and egress problems, so you're going to have to manage those successfully. You're going to have the same challenges at the new site if you did have a 2 City Hall model. So there's a lot to think through here in terms of the costs of dollars, the costs of time, the costs of efficiency, the costs of construction management. There's a lot of moving parts here. So we certainly need to think that through carefully and understand how much space we need. Are we considering work-from-home models where some of the administrative employees would need not 1 cubicle per FTE, but some fraction thereof? You know, we're at the beginning of these kinds of questions in my mind, but we haven't fully answered those. So I welcome the deliberation and thoughtful discussion. And there's a couple different ways we could go. And then in terms of like what's the priority for the public, you know, I was sincere in what I said before to Liberty, and I heard some colleagues talk about, you know, if the public's feeling the pain of increased property taxes, not at affordability, and not all of that's on the city of Lakewood. Much of it is on the national macroeconomic conditions. Our incomes haven't gone up, our costs are going up. Nevertheless, they feel the pain. So if we can't afford to do one new thing, what would that new thing be? Would it be City Hall operations, which is kind of behind the curtain, or would it be something more public-facing like parks renovations or roads or safe intersections, or some of both, okay? So those are questions on my mind. We do see the acute nature of police operations, but there could be a solution different than what's currently before us. And then the final piece of this, for just solving that one issue, you could take the approach, not a total city hall renovation, but just police headquarters renovation and solve for that. And I don't think that's been considered, or as far as I can tell. And that's not a criticism, it's an observation. The last point is there seems to be a time urgency to this, and I don't know if that's from Liberty's perspective or from the tax financing or from the administrations or what. But I guess a question for Liberty would be, if the city declined the option, would you be okay and have other options to find other tenants other than the city government, or is that kind of a painful thought you'd rather not entertain?
Absolutely. We would have, I mean, it's a marquee property right in the downtown district, right, for all the reasons that we think it services the customer service needs of this community best. We also think it's, as we had success with renovating the other building. So this isn't an all or none situation by any means. We do believe, and that's what we hope to demonstrate, so to the kind of the what and the how and the what, right? The how this could happen, what will we be delivering, why it is a better outcome. To touch on some of the things you're talking about, renovating an occupied building, as someone who's renovated a number of buildings, is infinitely more challenging than being able to have free space to renovate an unoccupied building, a vacant building. As you're looking at a space like current City Hall, to create what you talked about, how do you renovate police headquarters? You have to displace a certain number of people. You have operation that Mr. Story was touching on, operational mandates that can't be interrupted. Dispatch is here, the jail is here. You have to create laydown area for all the construction equipment. So where are you putting people while you're doing all of this? And to your comment, Councilman, about even if the administration moves to Warren Road and you're still renovating this building, you've created some additional elbow room to be able to do that. You have some flex space within the building to be able to start displacing folks out of their current space in the police department, for example, into another space temporarily. Not ideal long-term, but as a near-term, a short-term situation, giving you the room to be able to do that construction, I think that's viable. So those are the kinds of things that our minds that we're talking about, that we hope to talk about next week, and some of the sequencing we're thinking about.
I hear that, but it's also not impossible to do what we're talking about either. I'm sure it's been done.
No, nothing's
elsewhere.
impossible, but it's a matter of time and cost.
Yeah, so, but back to the question.
And
so,
inconvenience to your customers.
So for Liberty, from Liberty's perspective, you've got two successful options forward. You could have a public city government tenant or owner. I guess the concept is you're involved in the redevelopment and then at some point you sell. But you could also do the current business model, which is you're going to own, rehab, operate, and be the holder and the property manager of that property. And either of those things could work?
Correct.
From your perspective?
So we're going to step back a little bit and talk strategy on what we're going to do with this. As far as reinvigorating downtown, you'll bring a lot more people to that with City Hall than we will. I think the most likely second, and I'm not saying it is probably going to be 28 apartments, 30 apartments. That's going to do a little bit. That's the most likely. I don't know that that's what we'll do. But in terms of reinvigorating downtown, I don't think there's anything better. And we have a lot of time to talk about this, and I'm happy to sit down with anybody at any time and talk about it. The reason we're here, and there's always a lot of things to do. I'm on a number of nonprofit boards. We always have urgent things to do, and we also have to take care of business. We have, I happen to be on a board of school for learning disabled children. You're taking care of families. You're doing a project to build out a kindergarten. You can't say we're going to, this is just exclusive of all that. You have to do all of it. That's what you're doing here, right? We're here because I think there was a problem with your Justice Center and your courts more than anything else. And they were looking to find a way to make this your Justice Center. This is what I understand anyway. So the fact is, you're either going to add on here or you're going to find a way to relocate services that don't disconnect things enough where it doesn't make it efficient, which it feels to me like you've done. This isn't just shooting in the air. There was a feasibility study done, a program done, where every one of these departments were interviewed. What are you doing? How are you working together? How many people do you have? Do you expect to grow? Do you expect to shrink? Who needs to be connected to who? Council chambers, you don't even have offices from what I understand, or not much. Right, so all that has been digested and in the plan that we have, and the only reason we never shared it with you publicly is because we were going to have to compete for this project, and so that was our proprietary information. We paid for that, we did it, and we have it. Now, well, we know for a fact that if we don't have to make this a public bid process, if we reach a deal that you say this is what we want, and we say we will sell you that at our risk, we're willing to take that risk, right? So nothing's going to get signed until you say this is what we want. We want tiled bathrooms, or you go on with however. So if you need help to figure out what you want, that's one thing. You have a building department that's going to tell you whether or not things were installed properly. How you're going to go about verifying what we're doing, but I can tell you, if we put $16 million or whatever, $15 million or whatever the total cost is into this project, you're going to be sure that we're not going to be guessing at the end of that you're not going to buy it because we didn't do something that you wanted in this process, right? So some of what I'm hearing from you, I absolutely thank God you are actually thinking this way, because you're my representative, and you should be thinking this way. But I also feel like there's an awful lot of information that you haven't yet to be caught up on, like that, right? And I think that's just the public process, or if there's so many of you, we haven't really had a chance to sit down and talk about it. It's hard to do that. So I get it. But the fact is, the why is because this place hasn't had anything happen to it really any substance since 1958, and you've got a bunch of women police officers. This is the truth. This isn't it just is. You're going to have to solve the problem, whether this is the solution or another solution. The renovating our building, and we know a lot about this, and we also know your plan. We've laid it out. When you see it, you're going to make comments. I like that. I don't like it. You may love it. You may hate it. I don't know. But it fits, right? That solves the problem of getting departments out of this building that work well together, that don't need all the synergies of being with the rest of with the courts and the police to work. It reinvigorates downtown. From our perspective, I don't know that we wouldn't make more money doing something else. It's always easier. If we have 30 apartments here, I can raise the rents every week. I like to own things. I don't want to sell this. Frankly, I still don't want to sell it to you. But it's the right thing to do in this case because you want to own it, and it should be owned by the city, right? So there's a lot of this conversation that's already happened that we need to get together on. But when you stop and look at all these components, this is one thing you're doing, and you're going to be counsel for quite a while. There's going to be a lot of other big problems you're going to solve. What I'm hearing is that this isn't going to keep you from solving those problems. So that I hope we can kind of just put it aside. I think the decision you need to make is, does this solve the problem that your police and your courts have? And if it does solve the problem, and you are comfortable with where this is and what the cost is, then we keep working together. And nobody's agreeing to anything yet till that piece of paper is signed. I did a deal with Cleveland State University at 100,000 square feet. We didn't sign a piece of paper until it was all ready to go, honest to God. So nobody's asking anybody to take any chances until you're ready to take the chance. And ultimately, we're the ones that are going to take the chance. So we have to have an alignment of interest in getting this done. It solves problems. And frankly, I believe in win-win-wins. I don't believe anybody has to lose in any particular process, in any project. I don't see that happening here at all. Frankly, I haven't even agreed to do this yet because if you come back to me and you say, we'll take it for $16.5 million, but I want a fourth story on it, I'm not doing it. We have things to talk about. So just to keep an open mind that you are going to learn some of the things that you're already asking questions about. Everybody's got everybody's best interest in mind. And ultimately, if it's going to make sense, you're going to want to do it. And I think other locations were looked at too, and so it's not like this is the only lease or purchase that was. So I didn't personally do it, but I'm pretty sure the administration looked at several other properties. I don't know where they would be either. Not to fit what you want to do. And frankly, if you said you want to take half of it, we could work out a lease deal. I'd really love that. I would. telling you right now, you want to lease 15,000 feet from us? That would be my preference. But
Madam
that's
Chair,
not, okay. I just want to make sure that you understand.
So
there's
is
a
the
lot.
time urgency coming from Liberty, or is it from some other source?
So here's the time urgency. I think the time urgency is really that we've worked on this a long time. We have never once said that we're willing to walk away or kill the deal because it's not going fast enough. But from a practical perspective, we just want to know that we're working on it. If it ends up being a project that you think makes no sense at all, and that takes 3 months to figure out, so be it. I just want to know people are taking it seriously and they're working on it. That's a sense of urgency.
Understood.
Just
Thank
be
you.
working.
Yeah.
And if you kill it, you kill it. If I kill it, trust me, you have to be okay with that. Okay? But it's just working together and being open and transparent. Tell me what you want, and I'll tell you if I can do it or not.
We don't have more time, but for the administration, to be continued the next time. So part of my question will be, why 16.5 million now if we're not ready to do bricks and mortar and all of this stuff in 2026, but it's the design and architecture and planning mode, the number isn't 16.5 million. If the answer to that is, well, we got to start moving people around like Mr. Siley described, then to me, the concern is we're doing ready, fire, aim, because there's a lot of detail that I'm hearing good questions from my colleagues. I know that's not the intention.
Won't happen. That's not going to happen. It's just not. This is a process. What I'm suggesting is that we're working on that process as we go along. And AIM, my whole life is balancing risk. And I'm not going to ask you to do anything other than I would do for myself. It's absolutely AIM. Now, sometimes you can't have 100% assurance of anything. We will not have 100% assurance, but we'll be close enough that I'm willing to take that risk. And you should feel the same way. It will not be anything other than plan, aim, commit, fire, right? So,
Okay, let me just jump in there, because I think there's two different things here. There's what if we were to move forward, and what the delivery model is one process. The other thing is we have legislation we have to pass in terms of financing. That's a different process, and so these are the two things we're talking about here. So to know how much and when we're passing it is in terms of, like I was saying about the capital outlay.
You won't find anybody more flexible. In terms of that, if we're all working towards something and you've got your time frame that you need to meet, fast or slow, that is out. You have to do that. So that's fine. It's just knowing that we're trying to figure out whether this is go or no go.
I know Vice President Baker had a question.
Did I interrupt you?
That's normal.
Sorry.
Yeah, a couple follow-ups. I have to take a little bit of umbrage with like the building out front issue, and it might not be the right solution, but I mean, my dad was the project manager on connecting to the NICU at Fairview Hospital. People do those projects all the time. We redid the front of the zoo. That good contractors come up with plans for ingress, egress, and that's doable. So to say that that's the reason why we're not doing it, I think it's not a good enough reason for me. Second, I have two questions for Tom and Drew, Mr. Kalosh and Mr. Siley, and perhaps this is administration. Prevailing wage is important, so want to know that. And then two, would you sell the building to us and then bid on it?
If you want all of the information that we have in this open dialogue, that's harder to do, right? You're asking us to tell all the competition what we're doing, and we are paying for it. There's always a way to do anything you want. That's how this started. I don't know that that's going to be your most effective way to go, but there's always, we own the building. You want to buy it, we can certainly work something out. But let's, again, I'd rather lease it.
So, but that also goes to timing, Councilman, right? So if what we're hoping for Monday is, our expectation is that you're not going to have it completely baked, all of your questions answered on Monday. What we want to get a sense of is, does it answer a significant number of questions, and does council have additional questions that we can address? And then, or is it a red light day that this doesn't make any sense, we're not moving forward in any way on this because you can't get there, right? I don't think that's going to be the case, but if we're going to continue taking steps, our expectation would be that there's a good faith effort to continue to have the conversation. We understand you're evaluating other options at the same time. We aren't suggesting this is exclusive, that's the only thing you're considering. You know, and to your point about, yes, I mean, an addition could be put on this building, those things are done all the time. It's when you're evaluating those opportunities concurrently, operational risk, costs, timing, all of those things, versus what we're suggesting, how does that potentially work? To your other question, this is 100% union. So the contractors we're using are all union contractors, and that's how we priced with the proposal we actually provided.
Thank you.
Yeah, it just, from my perspective, and hopefully this is everybody's, this isn't a problem that can be avoided forever. What the city's problem, meaning what are you going to do with police and the courts? And it seems like the most logical situation, and the reason is mostly financial, because moving the police out and replacing all of that, it seems much more complicated. Maybe adding onto the building is going to be a better solution. My instincts are it isn't, but I've been wrong plenty of times in my life. My instincts are, and that's why I said the word perfect or whatever I said, because all the times I've been doing this, when something's supposed to happen, when it fits, you feel it, and you work out the problems. And this, I mean, if this were my business, not the city, again, it's mostly instinct, but we have a lot of data, which you don't have yet, and you will have it. This is going in the right direction. To solve a problem, you guys are going to have to solve, or the council after you, or the council after, somebody's going to have to solve this problem. So we're here to take a shot at solving the problem, see if we can work out that win-win for everybody. And you don't have enough information yet, that's obvious, but you will. And if at the end of the day you agree with us, we're going to do it. And if you don't, we're not. But we have to figure that out.
Yeah.
But I think, wait till you see the plan. It's, you know, you do have a responsibility to employees too. And I'll tell you, when you see
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. We're very aware of our responsibility to our employees. And we have stated clearly over and over how much everyone on this dais cares about solving the police problem. So I just want to be very clear about that. That has never been a question up here about anyone trying to pass off this responsibility at all.
And I didn't mean that.
So I just want to be clear about that, because we keep coming back to the why. We're all clear about the why. We're all very dedicated to the why.
And I apologize, that wasn't the reason I brought it up. I heard a few people asking about the why. And so I'm just solving the problem.
Yeah.
It's not,
in terms of the, thank you. And in terms of that why and the urgency, to me, the urgency is solving the police problem is the main urgency. Obviously, we want to be respectful of your business as well. We want you to be successful, whether it's with us or without us. You know, liberty's important to Lakewood. So, but in terms of solving the police problem, one of the things I heard tonight was about the question of how quickly we could address that. And I know, Mayor George, you mentioned that that we could be moving out some of the basement folks while the build-out is happening at Orange. So I guess I'm wondering if we could just go ahead and start doing that, because if we can find other space for them now, we could start solving the police problem while we work on the bigger solution. So that's something I'd like to see. If we can do that, we could at least solve a little bit of the problem earlier. We could rent some space elsewhere or whatever. So I would like to see that. But I know we were hoping, it seemed like the administration was hoping to have a quick intro tonight, and I think we've touched on a lot of good questions. Hopefully that'll be helpful for the next meeting. I do encourage council members to please send in the specifics you would like in the presentation so that we can have a productive conversation. And I hope, will we also have the folks who are offering us their legal opinion here at that meeting as well? I know we had outside counsel, I thought we for that.
Yeah, we'll reach out to them to check their availability. If not, I know we can try to get them at the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So with that, unless anybody has any burning things, let's save it for next week, and please forward your questions. So that, nothing further before committee of the whole. Without objection, we are adjourned.